Buenas tardes a todos los presentes. Es para Casa Árabe realmente un privilegio poder albergar esta tarde la mesa redonda Nuevos escenarios del mercado del arte, el panorama emergente de Arabia Saudí. Esta mesa redonda se desarrolla en el contexto de la feria ARCO y quiero destacar que para nosotros es realmente muy importante porque aborda algunas de las dimensiones también centrales de nuestro trabajo, tanto por lo que se refiere a elementos de contenido o vectores de trabajo como a zona geográfica. Sobre el primer tema, las cuestiones de naturaleza económica ligadas a las artes visuales son fundamentales para nosotros. Y sobre la segunda cuestión, quiero destacar que esta institución cada vez más trata de focalizar sus actividades en unas zonas que han estado, zonas del mundo árabe, generalmente marginadas, por así decirlo, en España, en nuestro país. Es tradicional conocer o mantener estrechos conocimientos, relaciones de conocimiento con el Magreb, con Marruecos, con Argelia, con Túnez, pero realmente los países, digamos, del Golfo y en general los países del Oriente Medio estaban, por así decirlo, más lejos del imaginario español. Por tanto, para nosotros, insisto, es importante porque hablamos de elementos como el mercado emergente del arte, hablamos de arte visual y hablamos de países del Golfo y específicamente hoy de Arabia Saudí. También quiero destacar una dimensión que va a quedar clara en la propia el desarrollo de esta mesa redonda, que es la centralidad de alguna manera de Londres en los mercados emergentes y de Londres también en el centro, por así decirlo, o uno de los elementos centrales del mercado del arte ligado al mundo árabe. Y esto lo destaco porque Casa Árabe, dentro de aproximadamente 3 meses, tendrá una serie de hitos o de momentos también en Londres en relación con la School of Oriental and African Studies, la SOAS, con la Victorian Albert Museum y con la Fundación Catán. En este momento, en la propia Fundación Catán, se alberga una exposición del pintor Hanush que se encuentra entre nosotros, con participación de Casa Árabe, pero lo importante es que dentro de una semana lo tendremos aquí, precisamente con nosotros en una exposición. Sin más, voy a presentar a los participantes y lo voy a hacer dándoles posteriormente la palabra. Generalmente lo hacemos introduciendo a todos al mismo tiempo, pero en esta ocasión quiero hacerlo individualmente. Por otro lado, señalar que en el canal 0 pueden seguir en español la conferencia, en el 1 en árabe y en el 2 en inglés. Y paso a presentar a la primera persona, que es Sara Raza. Sara Raza es crítica de arte y comisaria independiente, fundadora de Punk Orientalism, una plataforma multidisciplinar de arte centrada en el arte de Asia Central en la era postsoviética. Ha sido redactora de las revistas Art Asia Pacific Magazine y Brass y Harper's Bazaar Art Arabia. Está afincada en Londres de Oriente Medio y es comisaria adjunta del Centro de Arte en Maraya de Sharjah, Emiratos Árabes Unidos. Desde 2010 ha participado como ponente en el Instituto de Arte de Sotheby's, London. Ha sido responsable de comisariado y programas educativos en el espacio Al-Ain de Riyadh, Arabia Saudí. Ha trabajado como comisaria independiente para la Tate Modern y entre sus proyectos de comisariado cabe destacar Rhizoma, presentado en la última Bienal de Venecia. Sara, tiene la palabra.
Oh, sorry, do I have to repeat all of that? Firstly, thank you very much, Eduardo. Thank you, Casa Árabe and Sabrina Amrani Gallery for organizing this exciting event this evening on new scenarios of the art market, the emergent scene of Saudi Arabia. I'll be particularly speaking on curatorial practice within the Gulf from a personal perspective, not from a pan-regional perspective, but through my own working curatorial knowledge in the region. As Eduardo mentioned, I work as the Associate Curator of Mariah Arts Center, but prior to that, I was the founding head of curatorial programs at Alan Art Space in Riyadh, which was the first curated art space in Saudi Arabia. And this is Alan. And basically, Alan Art Space was set up by Naima and Mohammed Al-Saderi. And they are two young siblings from the Al-Saderi family, from the royal family in Saudi Arabia, who had a very lofty ambition, and their ambition was really to bring contemporary art to Riyadh. I used to live in Riyadh 23 years ago, and returning back, it was quite a challenge to see how the city had developed in terms of its modernity, but how little had happened in terms of the arts infrastructure. So my role with Naima and Mohammed and another colleague of ours called Jamal Tayara Barudi was to really bring a concept of contemporary art, bring the curatorial concept to Riyadh, and also set up an art space that had a multi-functional approach in terms of having a library, an education space, which was very active in running education programs for all ages, for adults, for children, etc., as well as building a curated exhibitions program. And the program was really quite diverse in terms of firstly supporting emerging Saudi artists. The mandate was to work with strictly emerging artists, so from Saudi Arabia, but also pan-Gulf as well, to include other countries. The first exhibition was entitled Soft Power, and it included three contemporary women artists, Sara Abu Abdallah, Manal Al-Dawan, and Sara Al-Abdali. So the three artists were kind of exploring non-militant approaches to femininity within a Saudi contemporary art context. But as an overview, many of you might not be familiar, but Saudi art has recently come to great attention in the West, but also within the Gulf region. Over the course of about 6 to 7 years, there has been a grassroots movement inside Saudi Arabia, mostly led by artist collectives, artist groups, which has happened in different cities. So all the way from the Asir Mountains region to Jeddah as well, and Riyadh. So there are small pockets inside Saudi Arabia, but also in the diaspora, there are many organizations that have supported contemporary arts, for example, in London, Edge of Arabia, and recently formed Saudi Art Council this year, which was inaugurated at the Jeddah Art Week. So there are different groups that are emerging, and mostly with an artist-led focus. The two main artists that are most familiar internationally and regionally are Ahmed Mata and Abdul Anasa Garam, but also a series of female artists as well, Manal Al-Dawan, which I mentioned as well, Mahu Mala, which are fast gaining international attention also. And in terms of coming back to Alan, what really Alan was trying to focus on was to bring these multi-voices and really start to create a critical dialogue around art practice in Saudi Arabia. I must say that in terms of arts academia and centers for peer-led dialogue, that it's extremely limited in Saudi Arabia. So it really, artists rely on one another for support, and also concurrent with the artists-led groups, there are also several collectors. Obviously, Basma will be here speaking later today about her role, but also several others who have really supported artists in terms of offering them patronage, in terms of affording them artist studio space, etc. Leading on from Alan, these are some more images, just to give you an idea. Alan was the first space of its kind in Saudi Arabia. Particularly, Riyadh is a very conservative country. I mean, cities, beg your pardon, city. So there they have a very different rhetoric in terms of understanding art, and mainly their practice or their interest in art has been more craft-based. But only in recent years has there been a return to contemporary practice. In addition to Al-An, there is also the studio space of Abdul Nasser Garam, who has launched an international residency program as well for emerging artists from Saudi Arabia, but also pan-Gulf and pan-Middle East as well, which is starting to show how the city is evolving. Al-An, in terms of how it's structured, is that it hosts a series of exhibitions throughout the year. There are 4 exhibitions curated by the in-house curators, but also by guest curators as well. So we also invited several other specialists to come and join. And we also built a multifunctional library. And within the library, there were books. We were lucky to receive books from across the Middle East, as well as stocking a series of magazines as well to provide literature, to provide the space for young people to come. And also, Riyadh is diplomatic city as well in terms of the amount of influx of business people and people who come for political affairs, etc., through Saudi Arabia. So there was often a lot of events for embassies as well. So we did a lot of collaborations with embassies, but also providing an education format. Education was really at the core for Al-An, particularly providing a space where artists and young critics, etc., could come together. They could research. They could also create a dialogue amongst one another, but also find that space to, just have a coffee and a meeting point as well. Moving on from Al-An, another project I'd like to highlight that really fueled my curiosity. As I mentioned, I returned to Saudi after a very long time, almost 2 decades. And what I had noticed was the advancement in technology amongst young people. Saudi Arabia has one of the youngest populations in the Middle East, akin to Iran, also where there is a huge population that is under the age of 30. And these young people, they turn to the internet a lot. They are very, very technologically astute in terms of tweeting, in terms of Facebook. I was actually quite shocked at how fast, news would spread through these social media channels. And for me, that was very, very interesting. Following on from, these are some images, of some of the artworks that was situated in Al-An Art Space. This work by Sara Abu Abdallah traveled then to the Sharjah Biennale as well after it received its premiere at Al-An Art Space. The project I wanted to highlight was Rhizoma, that was based on this cohort of young artists who are very much technologically astute. Rhizoma was the first and probably the largest exhibition of Saudi contemporary artists under the age of 30 within the Biennale context. And really, the premise behind this project, Rhizome is coming from the Greek word for roots, but they shoot both vertically and horizontally. So the whole idea was to look at an art movement which is not rooted, in a sense that if you explore other art movements in the Arab world, for example, they are much more structured in terms of their history. You can trace their lineage. So for example, one looks at modernism within the Egyptian context. You can trace when modernity occurred, then you can trace when contemporary art. But in the Gulf, and particularly in Saudi Arabia, there has been, obviously due to post-oil age, and kind of fast-track modernity, where they haven't seen that smooth relationship from modernity to contemporary, and that has also been affected the art scene. So in particular, in terms of Rhizoma, that was really the premise there, to bring these artists together who are don't have a set beginning, middle, or ending. They're somewhere in the middle, like a non-linear group of artists. And as I mentioned, there was a lot of technology involved. So we involved a lot of YouTube groups in the project. There were a lot of young renegade filmmakers. Saudi Arabia, incidentally, has the largest YouTube subscribers in the world and largest YouTube following. So it's very interesting that I also looked to this element because there isn't a new media practice. In a country where film is banned, cinemas don't exist. I mean, film does exist, but cinema is not commonplace there. There are a lot of private cinemas, but it is not a practice that can occur. So looking at the internet became a really interesting challenge to look at new media practice in particular. And one of the groups that I'm going to highlight now were Telfaz 11. And They are a young group of Saudi filmmakers, but cultural anthropologists, artists, who came together to really use YouTube as a medium, as an art medium. And one particular work I wanted to highlight today by this group. Oh, excuse me, what has happened here? Okay, sorry. Is a work by Telfaz 11. So they have a following in something like 600 million, like global, not just within Saudi Arabia, but like global following of young people following them across the Arab world. And I wanted to show you some of their work. And this work was made for Venice in particular. So I just wanted to show you a small segment.
Yeah, this international politics paper is really stressing me out right now.
What paper?
The paper Shariva signed last week.
No, he said it's due to next month.
No, it's due tomorrow.
What?
Don't you remember?
In this country on a student visa should be under scrutiny in the Boston bombing case. The 22-year-old was hurt in a bombing, treated in a Boston hospital. A situation so intense that Homeland Security Director Janet Napolitano addressed it.
He was not on a watch list. What happened?
Mike, you forgot your phone.
It's okay, I'll let it.
شو هم ذا؟ أيضا مرة هذا الفيلم.
Why is he in the hospital? He gets his. Did you talk to him? No. Well, how do you know he was hurt that
زبنة خويك والله تخوف يا كابتن.
Who said that to you?
ايش تتوقع يعني؟ قاعد يطالع في التلفزيون الارهابيين يشبهون اللي جالسين جنبه، اكيد بيخاف.
لهذا الدرجة يعني بتقنعني ان كل العالم اللي برا قامطين وارهاب ايش تعرف؟
انت على بالك انه هو الوحيد؟ كلهم يفكرون زي كذا. ايش الحل طيب؟
يا عيال ممكن نساعد ولد المنزل يا عيال؟
I just wanted to highlight a little bit. You can actually watch several of their films on their YouTube channel, which is La Yakhtar, Telfaz 11. Otherwise, unfortunately, we won't be able to discuss many other. But the whole idea was here that satire and humor is a really powerful tool. And this is something being explored by the artists within Saudi Arabia. Particularly, many people assume that, you know, there is strict censorship, but there's often a way in which censorship can be reverted. And Telfaz 11 are an important group, and they have a very huge following, as I mentioned, but also in terms of their kind of regional dialogue or pan-regional dialogue is something a little bit more expanded. I mean, there is a term that is floating over the last few years, which is Gulf Futurism, which was defined by a Qatari artist called Sofia Al-Maria. And Gulf Futurism is really this generation of young people who are under the age of 30. They've grown up post-oil society, not just in Saudi Arabia. This is also mirrored within the UAE and Qatar as well. And they have grown up with vast amount of infrastructure being built around them very, very rapidly. Cities have transformed. Modernity has occurred at a very fast pace. And that has been very, very interesting in terms of critically and a material to work with as a curator for myself. But coming back to my other work, I wanted to highlight some other projects that I'm working on within a Gulf context. As I mentioned, I'm also the curator of the Maraya Arts Center in Sharjah, although I work between London and the Emirates. And we have a mandate to really support Gulf artists, but also wider remit of Arab artists from the wider MENA, Middle East and North African region, and also those that reside within the diaspora internationally. And I've just highlighted a few projects in which we had invited a series of international artists, Arab artists, one of them being Wafa Bilal, who is an NYU professor of Iraqi origin. And Wafa is an artist who, once again, uses technology. The internet is a wide remit of his work, but also he is highly influenced by the power and the capability of the camera and the kind of idea of imaging as well. Wafa is known for staging a quite provocative performance for a year in which he mounted a camera on the back of his head in a statement on surveillance, but also to document his life over a 1-year period. The whole concept of camera derived from his interest in Islamic sciences, particularly within the work of Ibn Haytham, who's a very important scientist from Iraq. His ethnicity is sometimes debated whether he was Persian or Arab, but for the argument's sake, we'll say he was Iraqi today. And one of the projects that we commissioned for Wafa was based on the camera obscura. And it also involved the work of another scientist called Al-Jazri, both from the 10th century, from the golden age of Islam, which ideas were reappropriated to build a large-scale sculpture of the pinhole camera effect, which is the images that you are seeing behind us. We actually recreated this in Sharjah. This project was created in particular for this year, because this year Sharjah is the Islamic cultural capital of the Islamic world. So there will be a lot of focus on educational projects, but also projects that highlight the kind of glory of the Islamic world, and particular science is a phenomenal aspect of that. So that was included within this project. And the whole idea of this project, that there were 15 motorized irises that worked on computerized process, and they open and shut. They open for 10 minutes, and then they close for a further 15 minutes to allow the eyes to adjust to the darkness. So light comes in, and then the space goes dark. And what you see is the reversed image within the actual space. It's a very magical moment, but also we wanted to highlight that this is the achievement of pioneering Islamic science. And if any of you are coming to Art Dubai next month, then please, you're welcome to join us in Sharjah to look at this project. Following on, another project I wanted to highlight is by Iraqi-Finnish artist Adil Abedin. This was also another commission project entitled Blueprint. Adil is an artist who is actually showing at the moment here in Madrid at the Finnish Institute. He has some project here as well. And he's an artist well known for his phenomenal video work, but also installation projects as well. For this particular project entitled Blueprint, Blueprint is the first stage in any engineering or architectural drawing. It is the actual DNA of a particular project. So here the whole concept became to look at Arab identity within a post-Arab Spring era within the fictitious idea of creating a mock factory. So how do we do this, you know? So Adil came up with the concept of designing a fictitious machine in which Arab identity is constructed, and then at the end it's resulted. So the start of the drawing, which came from right to left, it started off with a very old model of an industrialized machine that started in the Victorian era, which is when industrialization was really at the pinnacle within England, for example. And then it goes through different eras, and also that was a very important moment in colonial history as well, in which the Arab world, particularly Iraq, was also part of the British colony as well, and mandate. So another element was to look at the ways in which Arab identity is going through this kind of moment, being constructed, particularly as a part of a chain for Western commodity, if you like. So this was the concept here. We recreated it. As it came towards the left, it became very, very modern. It became a model that one could identify with within practice, and you can identify with the kind of machinery that you would see in an ordinary factory. There was also a very interesting sound component. This is a detail, so you can see how detailed it actually was working with a mechanical engineer to design this. And so the drawing was in 7 parts, as I mentioned. So it also had an overbearing sound component. So when you came into the space, you saw the whole large-scale drawing, but you also had this bizarre sound, which you don't see. There are several speakers behind that would create this exaggerated sound of a machine that's gone almost, you know, insane in terms of it. So that was exaggerated and kind of humor as well, a kind of dark humor to say that this is the way in which Arab identity is currently being constructed in a very humorous way. Another recent project is by Mohammed Qasim. He is a leading Emirati artist, and the project entailed, we worked with Mohammed for over a year to come up with a project that would look at his career. I mean, he is one of the kind of conceptual artists to occur from the Emirates, but also he has a vast degree of practice that kind of alludes to navigation. He collects through GPS readings every kind of object scenario in terms of apparel, clothing, buildings. He would take a GPS reading of everything. And over the years, over 14 years almost, he had thousands and thousands of readings. So we had a challenge, what should we do with all of this material? So we had decided to kind of bring together a cuboid space that would reflect upon, like alternative retrospective upon all this material that's residing within his computer, like almost like a digital debris that it's there, it's mundane. How can we recreate a kind of experience from that? So as I mentioned, we worked with kind of a cuboid space, but worked with a computer programmer from the American University of Sharjah who was able to create a special program for us based on all of these coordinates. Many of you might be familiar with Mohammed's work because he was part of the official UA pavilion created by Reem Fader, young curator from the Guggenheim. She curated his work, so I don't know if any of you saw that in Venice. It was a very important project, which once again, you know, talked about his work with navigation. Another project I wanted to highlight, which was not at Maraya, which was at the Pavilion, was by an artist called Ergin Jashivishlu, and it was entitled Dust Breeding. It was another project I curated earlier in 2011 in Dubai. But the reason I decided to highlight this project, because it was, once again, exploring the idea of vertical and horizontal expansion of cities and going back to that idea about fast-track modernity, about Gulf futurism. It was a commentary on that. Although the architectural drawing, it's an anamorphic drawing here that you see, was actually taken from a cement factory in, it's just on the outskirts of Istanbul, but it became very relevant within a Gulf context. And here you see the idea was that the anamorphic drawing became 3D depending on where you were standing. So we had a hidden camera, then people could then see how they were situated within the space. And so the whole idea of urban space was very important, and coming back to the way in which the region is expanding, and not just Saudi Arabia, as I mentioned, the Gulf itself. So these projects are just a kind of personal introduction to give you on the kind of diversity of curatorial practice that is occurring. But based on my own experience, I don't want to give an overview because there are vast amounts of different projects occurring. Some are commercially situated, others are not. You know, they're more based around nurturing artists and commissions, etc. So just to give you a slight personal overview of what is occurring. I'm sure we'll have questions at the end, but thank you very much for listening.
Muchas gracias, Sara, por un lado, por el diagnóstico de las dificultades que en una sociedad como la de Riyadh y Arabia Saudí para desarrollar estos proyectos, y después por la síntesis de los proyectos. Paso la palabra ahora, voy a pasar la palabra a Basma Al Sulaiman, que es una importante coleccionista de arte nacida en Arabia Saudí con residencia en Londres desde el año 2000. Tiene estudios en literatura inglesa y en arte moderno y contemporáneo en Christie's. Comenzó a coleccionar antigüedades y piezas orientalistas ya en los años 80, derivando su interés en piezas contemporáneas, sobre todo a raíz de la famosa exposición Sensation en la Royal Academy of Art londinense. Entre los muchos artistas contemporáneos de todo el mundo con los que cuenta su colección, le ha dedicado siempre un especial lugar a la obra de creadores saudíes. Su afán por darles a conocer se ha visto reflejado en el primer museo virtual de artistas saudíes contemporáneos que con el nombre de Basmoca ha fundado esta amante del arte. Basma.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to start by saying thank you for Sabrina and Casa Árabe for this opportunity, and thank you for all of you for joining us today and making the effort to come. First, I would like to start by saying I mean, I travel a lot and I go to a lot of, I will start by actually giving you a brief history and a background about Saudi Arabia. During my travels and, you know, the art lectures I attend and the art fairs, I'm always faced with a question. People come to me and say, "You're from Saudi Arabia?" I say, "Yes." They say, "Well, being from Saudi Arabia, such a rich country, you have so much wealth, why you don't have museums? Why you don't have galleries? Why do you don't have art institution?" And I stand there and I look at them and I say, "Can I ask you a question?" I answer actually by a question, which a question that I would like to ask all of you. How old do you think is Saudi Arabia? People think maybe 1,000 years, 500 years, BC? No, we're actually less than 100 years old. But don't get me wrong. I mean, civilization, it's been there for more than 1,000 years. You know, Islam, it's the birth of Islam, the peninsula, the Arabian Peninsula. But as a country, Saudi Arabia was established. I would like to give you those dates, just maybe then you can put things in context. Saudi Arabia was created in 1932. 1932. 1932, all the art movements were there. Impressionism, I mean, Picasso did his Les Demoiselles de Avenue in 1907. Miro did The Birth of the Word, 1925. Again, the Water Lilies, Monet, 1907. Saudi Arabia, 1932. So what applies to everybody else does not apply to us. Saudi Arabia was a vast land, desert. We were very poor, fragmented tribes. I mean, we were just Bedouins, you know, like, and we were, the only thing was on our mind at that time was to survive. So, I mean, to talk about these issues was a bit before our time. And then in 1938, the oil was discovered, and actually money started coming in the 40s and the 50s. So from that time till today, we had a very important things to do, build a country. We needed to build a country, we needed the infrastructures, and again, would we build a museum or a hospital? Would we we invest in a gallery, or we invest in schools and education? Would we invest in an artist, or we invest in people that can lead the country and take it to where it is? So the priorities differs. You know, and this is where, you know, like I always say, the priorities differs. But I mean, that doesn't mean we didn't make any steps on the cultural scene. In the past, I mean, there were so many kind of like personal efforts. A lot of the artists that we had, or the art initiatives or everything, it was very much an individual and a personal thing. But in the last, I would say, 6-7 years, the picture has changed. With the growth development and so many things happening, there came a huge interest. and a huge kind of like a lot of I would say initiatives that has been done on a personal levels, like what Sara was saying, like galleries started opening, artists started doing their work. I mean, school and educational program on a very, very small scale. I wouldn't say on a large scale, but I mean the interest started to, and our artists started to do works, you know, like really based on their own initiatives, but then supported by patron galleries. I mean, a lot of the artists now, I mean, in these past 6 years or 7 years, they started appearing on the international market. They started being collected by museums. Galleries abroad started kind of like taking them, like Sabrina and many others, a lot of exchange program, residency program. So the scene has started to change. And in that positive kind of like atmosphere came actually the art supporters, which they could be, I mean, they range from institutions, again, on a personal level, and patrons, art lovers, supporters, collectors, and actually I am lucky to be one of them. You know, like I started collecting art from the 80s, before I had any kind of like formal education. I started from the 80s. I collected by instinct. I bought what I loved. I had the opportunity to travel. So during my travel, I visited like museums, galleries, and I did my collection but without education. Then in 2000, I went to a program in Christie's, and I graduated with my diploma in contemporary and modern art. And then things started to become clearer. I understood more, and I collected more, but more on the international level, and international artists. But after that, again, I started to pay attention to the Gulf, the Middle East, and Saudi art. And I found that there is a lot of opportunity there, and there is a lot of good art that is coming from that part of the world. So I went back to Saudi, and I started working with the artists. And it was my initial objective was actually to support the artists and work with them, in the same time produce work that is close or similar to the standards that I have seen abroad. And I did a lot of like site-specific project with the artists, but again on a very personal level. You know, it was not kind of like I mean, it was not like a organized thing, but more on a personal level. So I worked with the artists. We did a lot of project. I mean, as well, there was a very interesting thing is that I worked with few people, and we produced the first Saudi art guide, which was like a guide to explain and direct people to what kind of shows and arts has been happening there. And then I woke up one day and I found, oh my God, I have a big collection. What am I going to do with it, you know? Then I said, okay, let's dream. So I said, okay, what's my biggest dream? The biggest dream would be have a museum. Is it possible? Is it feasible? Takes logistics, you know? And I kept on thinking of these things until in 2011, I came across a technology. The technology was like called the metaverse. And then this technology basically is about virtual world. I said, okay, so I met with the people. I said, can I kind of create a museum, a virtual museum? And they said, well, let's try. I said, okay, I need a virtual museum that would have my collection. And we kept on working. It was difficult. It was not possible. It took a bit of time. And then finally, we managed to find the right technology that can apply to that. And I created with them a museum. It's called Basmoca, which stand for Basma's Museum of Contemporary Art, or Basma Saudi Museum of Contemporary Art. And basically it has my collection. It is the first of its kind in the world, because it is based on a real collection and not on a virtual collection. The technology I would like to explain, I'll show you a film about it, but the technology basically is about creating this metaverse. Metaverse is virtual world where people can interact in a 3D cyberspace, like depicting the real world, but without limitation. Okay, that sounds difficult, so I'll explain it in a better way. So it is like you and me and all of us, we are creating our own avatars that represent us in that virtual world where you can go actually and visit that museum. So the museum in a virtual world, you have your avatar, I have my avatar, our avatar goes to that virtual world and we control it, but we are here and they are there. But they can see the museum, they can go walk through it, you control it. So you can, I mean, even if like we meet each other there, we can talk, we can speak, and it's a very advanced technology, but it is very much in the same time a new way of crossing bridges and crossing borders. There is no time limitation, there is no censorship, there is nothing, it is virtual. So it is untarnished, nobody can touch it, you know. And I would like to start by showing you the museum. The museum, I had to get an architect to actually plan that museum, because what you do is you rent the land, and when you rent the land, you have to get an architect to build it, and when that architect builds it, you have to have the people to curate it. So it's a big process, but this is the land which I wanted it to be a little bit like Saudi Arabia, and the architect is like a tent. So it's across a contemporary, but in the same time, it's a functional space. So, and this is the land which is like Saudi Jeddah, where I come from, and this is the Red Sea, and this is the museum, which is, the museum is, can we have some sound, please? Just a bit. Yeah. Control there. Yeah. And the museum is like this tent, and this is the inside of the museum. Most of the work that is in there is based on my collection, and it's a discussion or a conversation between Western art and Saudi art. And it's literally, you have to create your avatar, which we're gonna see now, and go and visit on my website, which is basmoca.com. This is, for example, like a Saudi artist. And the Saudi artist is in discussion in the same room with Bridget Riley, which is a British artist. So it was very much a curated show. And it has this kind of conversation, and the difference is, like, as you see, it's a 3D. It's not a flat picture. It's a 3D, and you have to construct it. It's not like you give them a piece and they would just put it. This is my avatar in the front of the museum, and these are people. These people can be avatars of people in the Far East, in America, in Saudi Arabia, anywhere. And everybody can meet in Basmoca. We can speak, we can talk, and we can discuss art, or you can just walk around and watch it. And these are all behind each and every character of this avatar. There is a real human being. And that's a new way of looking at art. You know, the whole idea is nowadays it is, as Sara said, you know, everybody is technology driven, and a lot of the young people are not interested to literally go and visit museums, you know. So this is a way, rather than you go to a museum, we're going to bring the museum to you. And in the same time, it is accessible from everywhere. And for us in Saudi Arabia, you know, like with internet, you know, they can access this museum if it's in a village or if it's in a mountain or anywhere. People can have access to this website where they can go into this museum, discuss art, talk to each other, meet there. They can even make it as a meeting point in there. This is like, I go back, this is my avatar, and these are some of the people that visit. Some of them random, I don't know them, because anyone can just actually go to the website and visit. So it doesn't have any kind of restriction or limitation, you know, it is very much that way. And the collection, my collection is international in a sense, with a concentration as well on the Far East and in the Middle East. And as I said, the beauty of this is it is a 3D. For example, this is a Chinese artist in conversation with an Indian artist, and both of them are talking to each other with another Saudi artist. And this was the idea. The idea is to bridge between cultures and to bridge between Saudi Arabia. And it is one initiative, this my personal initiatives, was to show that in Saudi we are doing steps forward. We are doing steps to support and promote art and culture. And we needed to take our time. The time is right. We have great artists, you know, like Ayman from the people that started much earlier before everyone else. And we have a very good established artist. We have very good art that is coming from our part of the world. The time is just perfect now. We want to do the right steps. We want to learn from other people. We want to learn from, especially from our neighbors in the Gulf. We are not very much, we don't want to be commercially driven, and we want to have our own experience. We don't want to copy anybody. Our experience differs a lot because it applies to our tradition, customs, and culture, and we're just hoping is that everyone will give us the time and the support, and we hope we can deliver. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Basma. Voy a presentar a Ayman Yossri Daidban, pero antes quiero destacar que este acto en sí mismo no hubiera sido posible sin la colaboración estrecha con la galería madrileña Sabrina Amrani, y con Sabrina específicamente más que con la galería. Y quiero destacar esto, ahora señalaré por qué. Ayman Yossri Daidban nació en 1966, ha vivido casi toda su vida en Jeddah y se identifica plenamente con Arabia Saudí. Su origen es palestino. Esta sensación de dislocación nacional tiene un efecto sobre su producción artística. El trabajo de Yossri se caracteriza por su deseo de crear situaciones en lugar de producir mercancías concretas diseñadas para ser colgadas, compradas y vendidas. Aborda los temas de la identidad y de las memorias sociales colectivas compartidas. Ayman Yossri Daidban expone hasta el 1 de marzo en la galería madrileña Sabrina Amrani una serie de trabajos realizados en los últimos 5 años, agrupados bajo el título Common Grounds. Se trata de la primera vez que este artista expone en nuestro país. Ayman.
مرحبا للجميع. في البداية أحب أشكر المتواجدين والبيت العربي وجاليري سابرينا عمراني على إتاحة هذه الفرصة. دائما أواجه صعوبة في كيف يعني أبدأ الحوار عن فني، لكن هبدأ يعني من شرح نفسي ومن شرح أعمال الفنية وتبيانها من خلال بعض الأعمال الفنية اللي حدثت بالفعل. في 1998 بدأنا في جدة في معرض كان طليعي في وقته. 3 من الفنانين، أنا والفنان السعودي مهدي الجريبي والفنانة السعودية عبير الفتني، في محاولة لعمل معرض ذو طبيعة لصناعة حوار مع الآخر المتحفظ في المكان اللي نعيش فيه. في جدة الفن دائما متواجد في الشوارع على صيغة مجسمات فنية من كل أنحاء العالم، وهذا أعطى الآخرين فرصة للتحاور مع صيغ جمالية مختلفة، لكن دون الدخول في الأفكار اللي تبثها. يعني كان الجميع متأقلم مع الشكل بعيدا عن الفكرة. في معرض أسميناه مساحات مشتركة، هذا المعرض حاولنا من خلاله أن نتحاور مع خلق أعمال فنية تصنع حوار مع الناس، يعني المتلقي الفنون يعني عموما في جدة. فهذه بعض الصور تبين التفاعل اللي حدث أيضا من المسرحيين. كنا نحاول نعمل على وحدة الفنون، فكان المسرح الطائف كان مسرح تجريبي متشارك معنا في إحداث هذا العمل. طبعا ححاول يعني المرور سريعا على هذه الأعمال حتى يعني أبين جزء من الرغبة الدائمة في أنه نصنع حراك وتفاعل في الوسط اللي كنا نعيش فيه كفنانين. فهذيك الفترة كان الفن مدعوم محاولات فردية من الفنانين، لكن بعد ذلك يعني بدأت تظهر مؤسسات فن تدعم الفن مثل مؤسسة المنصوري للثقافة والإبداع، وكانت بالنسبة لنا كفنانين هذه محطة يعني تفاؤل كبيرة. وبعدين يعني بدأ يحدث تطور في الرؤية الفنية لدى الفنانين ولدى المتلقين، حتى أنها وصلت مؤخرا إلى لحظة معاصرة جدا، وأستطيع أن أحدد بدايتها من سنة 2008. ما أورد الآن قبل 2008 وبعد 2008 كأنه أنا كشخص أو كفنان انقسم فني إلى قسمين: قسم قبل الفنون الجديدة وقسم في الأول. هذه أول محاولة يعني لهذا المشروع مساحات مشتركة. حاولت في خلال أعمالي الفنية أن أطرح تساؤلات حوالين الانتماء، أفكاري عن الانتماء. فأفكاري عن الانتماء بالنسبة لوطني مسقط رأسي اللي هي فلسطين، والبلد اللي نشأت فيه اللي هي المملكة العربية السعودية، كانت أخذت أبعاد يعني واضحة جدا في أعمالي الفنية. وكنت أسلط في أعمالي الفنية مجموعة من التساؤلات التي تبدو على السطح واضحة، لكنها تغوص في العمق في تساؤلات جدلية يعني تتعدد الأجوبة عليها. من أعمالي المعروضة الآن في جاليري سابرينا اللي هو أعمالي عن الايدنتيتي تبعتي، الهويتي اللي هو أنا كفلسطين. حبيت دائما في المجتمع اللي أعيش فيه أن أوضح جذوري بشكل واضح جدا حتى أستطيع التأقلم شخصيا مع المتغيرات. هذا التأقلم جعلني أشعر بأنه فكرة الانتماء هي فكرة بالنسبة للوضع في الحياة هي فكرة ملتبسة، والالتباس هذا حدث في أفكاري حول الراية أو العلم تبع الدولة. طبعا في فلسطين معروف علمها ومعروف ألوانه، لكن هو في الحقيقة غير موجود، يعني هو افتراضي أيضا، يعني في الذهن، في الذاكرة، لكن على الأرض يعني غير واضح. ففكرت في أحد الأيام بأنه هذه الهوية هي عبارة عن شيء يمكن التلاعب فيه أو تغييره، أو يعني انه كمرآة ممكن يمتص الاشكال والهويات الصغيرة، يعني اللي اصبحت في العالم المعاصر نعيش فيه هي عبارة عن هويات مهمة وكبيرة. فلجأت الى طي الاوراق، طي اشياء اجدها موجودة في كل يعني حركتي في الحياة اليومية، أيضا إلى طي صفائح معدنية لامعة منعكسة على هيئة العلم في تفاصيله البسيطة يعني. فمثلا هذه المجموعة الكاملة أنتجت منها في النهاية عمل كبير بعنوان جرس. هذا العمل اتعرض في دبي، وهو عبارة عن عمل عملاق يتم يعني جرس يتم هزه، عبارة عن صفائح معدنية مطوية على هيئة علم فلسطين بس بدون ألوان طبعا، وتم التفاعل معه من قبل المتلقين والناس يعني بتحريكه وهزه، وهذا أحدث الصراحة تفاعل أنا دائما في أعمالي أحاول الوصول له. كيف أصل للآخر، كيف أتفاعل معه، كيف أشعر بالانتماء الإنساني من خلال يعني من خلال الفن. واعتقدت أنه الفن هو الذريعة المناسبة لخلق هذا التواصل وشعوري بالوجود الفعال في الحياة، حيث أنه أي يعني وجود آخر لي في الحياة كطريقة رسمية يعني باهت وبارد وغير واضح. أعمالي تتخذ هذا أحد الأعمال الموجودة في صيغ أخرى. الأعمال اللي هي سبتايتل. مجموعة السبتايتل هي مجموعة تعتمد أنه على الأشياء الالتقاطات الموجودة والشهيرة اللي يستطيع ملاحظتها الآخرين في حياتهم اليومية طوال الوقت. يعجبني كفنان هو الوسائط اللي تنقل ثقافتين مختلفتين محايدتين منفصلتين، تواجدهم مع بعض يخلق حالة جديدة ثالثة، هي حالة ثقافية ممكن أفهم من خلالها العالم وتأثير العالم في الأعمال. فمثلا من خلال الأفلام هوليوود الغربية يأتي الغرب بالكامل وثقافته إلى منزلي وأنا عبر الفضاء، فحيث أنه لا أجد التحدث بالإنجليزية فيجيني الفيلم مترجم باللغة العربية. فجأة أجد على الشاشة مشهد غربي ولغة عربية، كلام عربي مكتوب بحرفه بشكله كذا. هذا المنظر الثابت لما نثبته، لما نعمل له بوز مثلا هنا، هذا المنظر الثابت أكتشف فجأة أنه يعني يعيد يعني الحكايات الذات من الشرق ذات الطابع العربي أو الإسلامي، هوليود تنتجها ثم استقبلها أنا في بيتي ثاني مرة بمشهد جديد مختلف. فمثلا في هذه الصورة الكلام المكتوب بالإنجليزي، لكن دينزل واشنطن كممثل كان يمثل سيرة مالكوم إكس، وكان يقرأ الفاتحة بلغة عربية ويرتلها. عجبني هذا التبادل اللي يحدث عن طريق الفن، عن طريق الفيلم وكذا. فبدأ لي كانوا نوع من التوثيق اللي أستطيع منه فهم الجسور اللي تعبر بالثقافات من جهة إلى أخرى. هذا من الأعمال اللي أعتبرها من الأعمال يعني المميزة، حيث أنه كان أحد أحلامي كيف ممكن يكون في ترجمة لأهم سورة في القرآن الكريم اللي هي الفاتحة موجودة بلغة إنجليزية عبر جسر اللي هو الفن، كيف يكون هذا فن. فمن الأشياء الرائعة أنه مدام بسمة اقتنت هذا العمل، وكل مرة أدخل إلى منزلها بصراحة أشوف في الواجهة الفاتحة باللغة الإنجليزية، أشعر بأني كفنان بالنجاح والسعادة. في نوع آخر من الفنون اللي عملها اللي هي أيضا تعتمد على في 2008 أيضا هذا وسيط بين البوستر للأفلام العربية. البوستر هذه الأفلام العربية طبعا المصرية، نحن كنا نعيش في مجتمع ما في سينما. كمان الشيء الوحيد اللي نستطيع فيه يعني رؤية قصصنا اليومية هي عبارة عن الأفلام العربية اللي كانت تيجي عبر أنتن نضعه بالخفية حتى نستقبل القناة الأولى والثانية المصرية في لحظة أنا نشأت فيها كشاب. يعني هذه الأفلام كانوا الأهل ونحن والجميع يعني يعني نتعامل معها كنوع من يعني يعني نحن رومانسيين في المواضيع هذه، كانت يعني تؤثر فينا. العمل هذا أهميته عندي بالنسبة أنه يحمل اللغة عربية، لغة عربية ورسومات وأسماء عربية كثيرة يعني. وحبيت أظهره على هذا الوسيط اللي هو علبة كلينكس، لأنه كان دارج أو معروف أنه علب الكلينكس تزين يعني. فحبيت أنه أنقل هذا الميراث النفسي واللغة والدلالات اللغة وكلها عبر هذا الوسيط الشكلي يعني. آخر شيء هذه مجموعة اسمها حرامات. هذه من المجموعات اللي برضه أيضا أخذت وسيط معروف للجميع، ثقافي واضح بسيط دون تدخلات مني، اللي هو إحرام الحج والعمرة. إحرام الحج والعمرة هذا عندما أحد يأخذ في الحج والعمرة في الثقافة تبعتنا، هو يكتسب يعني عندما تؤدي في الطقوس فإنه يكتسب طاقة يعني الأداء للطقس نفسه. فكنت أخذ من الحجاج والمعتمرين اللي أعرفهم الأصدقاء هذا الحرام، ثم أعيد يعني شده على شاصيه خشب، كأني أعيد فكرة الكانفاس مرة أخرى إلى اللوحة، لكن بدون تدخلات، غير أنه يكون أبيض، يكون في وضوح شديد. اللي لفت انتباهي في هذا العمل هو وجود الزخارف اللي موجودة في الإحرامات. بدراسة بسيطة لها تكتشف أنه هي لا تعترف يعني بجهة محددة، فتستطيع أن تجد زخارف إسلامية، زخارف في مسيحية، زخارف من ثقافات مختلفة يعني، بحيث أنه المصمم التجاري الهادي لا يستطيع التمييز بين الهويات والثقافات المختلفة للزخارف، إنما هو ينظر لشكلها فقط دون المضمون. فحبيت أعيد بناء هذه اللحظة، هي اللحظة العالمية بالنسبة للهوية يعني دينية اللي هي الإسلام، في أعمال من هذا النوع تعتمد على البساطة والوضوح، وإعادة إنشائها في أعمال ذات رسائل موضوعية في لحظتها. فمثلا هذا العمل اسمه الراعي. طبعا في الربيع العربي، فيما كان يسمى بالربيع العربي، كانت هذه اللحظة لحظة ثورات على الراعي، على الراعي. وطبعا نحن نعرف أنه الراعي هو يعني ليتحمل مسؤولية البناء بالكامل. وكان هذا مثال على الفكرة، وهو مثال مضاد يعني للفكرة المضادة لها. ويعني أتمنى إذا في أسئلة بعدين أنا أجاوب عليها. شكرا.
Muchas gracias, Ayman. Antes de pasar al turno de preguntas, si Sara o Basma tienen algún comentario, es el momento.
I just go back and I would like to, like ask if you would like any questions, if you'd like to ask us any questions. And I would like just to add one thing that I left it till the end, actually, which is in this year, for the first time in Jeddah, we have created the first Saudi Art Council. The Saudi Art Council consists of 14 members, and our mission is purely to support and promote Saudi art. And we had our first event about 3 weeks ago, and we called our initiative 2139. A lot of people, again, ask, what is 2139? It's not your typical Jeddah art or the Saudi art. Or 2139 is the coordinates of Jeddah. And it's a number that we wanted to raise curiosity, so people would ask, what is this? And this maybe will bring them to see and learn about our initiatives and mission. The Saudi Art Council are purely non-for-profit, non-commercial, and I please encourage you, all of you, to look at our website, which is 2139 Jeddah. And it is about supporting, promoting Saudi art nationally and internationally.
Actually, I have a question for Basma. Basma, I wanted to ask you about the Basmoca in particular. Can avatar personalities chat with you as well? Is there an online chat feature? How do they communicate?
Yeah, actually, the Basmoca, you can, if two avatars kind of meet in Basmoca, they can chat like a normal chat, and even there is a voice. Oh. They can even, put the voice on and you can speak. So there are these two features. And actually, one time we experimented by doing a lecture. So we invited one artist, and the artist was in Basmoca, and we invited people. And actually their avatars came, and we had a small lecture. And this is another way of utilizing the space where you can hold lectures with different artists from different parts of the world in over space, and audience can be, again, from different parts of the world. So you can have audience from, or participant from Far East, America, the Middle East, and you have your artists, for example, from Europe. And it's just another way of using this space.
Okay, thank you.
Basma, could you tell us more about your collection? You walked us through but how do you collect? What is your criteria? Who are some of the artists that you have? How many pieces do you have in your collection? Maybe you can share more about this information with us.
Actually, I would like to mention one piece that I bought in the 80s. Late 80s, I bought my first David Hockney without my knowledge that it was a David Hockney. And this year I met our the first artist in Saudi Arabia, a proper artist, Safiya bin Zagar. And Safiya was saying, she said, do you remember, Basma? I said, what? She said, when you were 12 years old, you came to my exhibition with your mom, and you refused to leave unless she would buy a painting for you. And I was 12 years old. I'm not going to tell you what's my age now, but at 12 years old, I think I had that instinct. After that, from from the 80s onwards and the 90s, I started buying actually without, a criteria. I just bought what I thought appealed to me, what I liked, and I feel very much it is very important that the collector have a kind of a personal relation with the work they buy. I personally don't believe in consultant. You know, with all due respect, I'm sure there are a lot of people that use consultant for if they have a kind of certain plan for their collection. But personally, I prefer to buy art that appeals to me. I'm gonna live with the art. It has to have an affiliation with me personally, and it has to answer to something in me. And I bought works from European artists like Basilets. I have a small Richter, not a big one, but a small Richter. I have Bridget Riley. I have Chinese. My collection is very strong into Chinese contemporary art. Like Wang Wangyi, Zhao Zhaogang, and Yu Minyun. I have Indian Sabut Gupta, Jatish Kalat. I have American. I have small Andy Warhol. I have as well, like I have Spanish Bosco Sode, which is a new art after living here. By the way, I live part of the year here in Madrid, which is my new passion. I love Madrid, and I'm so happy I am here. You're all lucky. I'm so happy to be here. And I have, of course, Middle Eastern. I have most of the Saudi artists. I have, I think if I never counted my collection, but I guess I do have as well video art, and I have photography. I have like Bill Viola, and I have photography, Strauss, and Richard Moss, and many other photographers, Vanessa Beecroft, and I think I have, I can't remember, but definitely more than 200 pieces. And I really collect by instinct. I collect what appeals to me. Definitely my taste after my education has changed a lot, and it went from, at the beginning we all buy decorative art because, that's what you first kind of like appeal to you, which is the common, which is you're used to. But after a while, and I think as well, the right way to collect is before collecting, you have to see. You have to visit museums, you have to go to galleries, shows, and nowadays there are so many shows that is available around, art fairs. To me, I look at art fairs not only from a commercial point, but I look at it as an open exhibition and a museum where you can go and look and learn, And the more you train your eye, the more you will be better by selecting the work that appeals to you. Don't think about it as well from like a commercial point of view. There is a lot of speculation. A lot of the art now, especially contemporary art, there is a lot of speculation. Oh, I'm gonna buy this artist because I think he has a future. I'm gonna sell him in 2-3 years' time, But this is not the right way. You have to buy right that you feel you're connecting to. Art is very important, is a reflection of oneself, and don't ever buy just for investment, I think the beauty behind the art is a beautiful experience, and we should all kind of pursue and follow. I hope it's helpful.
Por cierto, ahora que se refiere a este tema, quiero preguntar o quiero destacar que en el último año ha habido una especulación importante sobre arte iraní en la zona del Golfo, especialmente en los Emiratos. ¿A qué obedece, si hay alguna razón?
Iran is synonymous with art and culture. It's not just contemporary art. There's been a trajectory over centuries of art evolving. Iran in particular is not an Arab country first and foremost. Modernity occurred very differently in Iran under patronage of the wife of the Shah, Farah Diba, and she was a great patron of the arts in the 70s. And what is now defined as late modernity. But Iran had the position in the 70s of what the UAE has today in terms of its infrastructure. They were the first in the entire Middle East to open a contemporary art museum. But in terms of the explosion, for sure, I mean, the UAE affords Iranian artists a safe zone that they don't necessarily have in Iran due to Islamic State, that Iranian artists are able to flourish. And obviously there has been a very tight-knit community of Iranians as well that support art, and this is going back several decades in particular. But for sure there are explosions in terms of scenes, but it's not a scene that came out of nowhere. It didn't just fall out of the sky, it has evolved. But in terms of other emerging markets, for sure, there are speculation, as Basma highlighted, but often they can also be a fad as well, which is the downside. But in terms of any emerging market, there has to be some stability. So for example, I work a lot with Central Asia, and Central Asian contemporary art really came about for the last 2 or 3 decades, but in terms of building an emerging art scene, it's very nascent. It's not possible to build a commercially viable art scene, if you like.